Before anything, this is my game of the year. Welcome to the Game Design Perspective. I'm Santi. Today is just me. This is a shorter format of video to just unscripted talk about something that happened in the game industry or a game that we just played or something interesting that just we saw. And today we're going to talk about Baldur's Gate. Just a quick disclaimer, this is my opinion alone. In this case, it does not represent my brother, my employers, or any previous employer I ever had, and it especially does not represent any studio that we talk about this in this channel. That being said, Baldur's Gate 3. I really like this game. Like, I really do. But I think there is some clear points of improvement, in my opinion. So let's get into it. So I'm a little bit of a downer, so let's start with the bad. Something I really disliked with this game is their character controller. The game has other problems. It can be buggy, but the character controller itself, I understand this is an isometric CRPG turn-based, but there is a lot of exploration in the game, which means that, as we talked in this channel before, is your loops, right? So you have the very short loops, which is your immediate reaction when you touch the controller and you press a button or you push the stick forward. What is the game telling you? And most of the time it does a great job in its feedback for menus or its sound effects for any type of selection. These kind of the smallest interactions are really great, except the character controller. Controlling your character can be quite just buggy, not really fun. I think the animation is kind of awkward. The movement animation is kind of awkward. The characters move really slow, really clumsily, and they tend to get stuck really easily. And again, this is a isometric game. I understand where this is coming from, but they let me put the camera very close to the character to simulate a third person perspective, like a more traditional third person perspective, and you end up with this motion that just doesn't feel great. Again, it's not the purpose. It's not a platformer. It's not an action game. But with the amount of exploration the game has, you have to go to from point A to point B, which means a lot of walking and just walking. So yeah, you can select where you want to go and just wait. That's fine. In PC it tends to be more common. But even in that sense, the character tends to be really slow, and I think it would benefit from a more agile character controller a little bit. It doesn't have to break the immersion that you're not this ninja or something like that, even though you can make characters like this. But the reality is that it's just not really fun to control. Another thing that connects quite significantly to this is the camera. So the camera tends to be quite finicky. So it has it tends to jump around a lot. It can be quite difficult to control where you want it. And then again, you can keep it in a certain position and just play as an isometric game, and that's fine. But you tend to lose visibility of a lot of things in front of you. And then I think it's a missed opportunity, because Larian Studios has a great art style, wonderful environments, and they're very difficult to see. You can see them very well in isometric, but you cannot see the proportions of it. You cannot see the grandeur of it. And they have this camera that allows you, that is close to the character, but they don't go far enough, in my opinion. They don't allow you to look up. And I think in this case, with the amount of environments and everything, it worked with older CRPGs. But in this game, I find it as a wasted opportunity. Just the simple action of being able to look up, like we have this huge like airship that just crash landed. This is the beginning of the game. There's no big spoilers here, but there's this great environment, and I want to be immersed in it. And the only way I can see it is either from above, or when I want to see it from close, I just cannot. So a lot of exploration is very hard to see the proportions of things, and sometimes I find it really difficult to immerse myself in this kind of situation. And the thing is that the solution is, I find it quite simple. Uh, this just allow me to look up. Just don't stop me from getting close to a character. Just allow me to look up. There is now develop like my developer mind is going why they didn't do this, and there's a bunch of reasons they could. They might be how they manage their assets, it might be how they are doing their rendering, it might have been a performance issue. It can be because once certain things, when you move the camera, you have to render a lot of things, like you have to change what things are rendered really quickly. So one of the reasons they might not allow you to look up is because there is a lot of things that would change drastically, and they would be like a lot of popping as assets coming in and out. The rendering in 3D rendering, there's something called culling that is like what is actually in frame is the only thing that is rendered, and if it's outside of frame, it's not actually the renderer does not take it in consideration. This might be a reason. It might be that it just caused a lot of problems and they decided to scope down and not fix that issue, which is a perfectly valid reason. This is a perfectly valid reason. My developer is going, there is 1,000 reasons why they didn't do this. My consumer side is saying, I want to look up. So it's something that while playing the game, I have to kind of separate and see, would it be like, was there any value of allowing me to look up? I think so. And I wish I could. The final thing I did not like of Baldur's Gate 3 is their AI. So they have wonderful written characters. The story is great. But their AI pathfinding, their navigation, tends to not be great. Characters tend to get stuck really easily. And the level design does not mitigate this problem. So we're having two issues here. We're having that the navigation of your characters, they tend to get stuck, and then the level design tends to force me in several instances to get into elevators or jumping from platform to platform, which is when the AI struggles the most. So you end up having to struggle changing your party composition, detaching characters from your party, selecting them, bringing them back to where you want them, and then like attaching them back to your party, and then selecting the character you want to control. If it happened once, if it happened twice, if it happened 5, 10 times, it wouldn't have been that much of an issue. The thing is that is a constant thing happening. It happened to me almost every time there was like an opportunity to jump a platform. I would have to struggle with my characters not jumping behind me and struggle with them staying behind because I didn't notice that they were not following me because they're not always on frame. And it just became quite bothersome. The navigation of the AI became quite bothersome. I think in this case, I really miss a feature that allow me to teleport characters towards my party leader. So attach them to the party wherever they are and allow the party to get together easily. Because if a character gets stuck and gets lost in the map, when, let's say, oh, you go to you teleport or something, many times they stay where they are. So I think it's missing a feature here, in my opinion, that you could bring your characters towards you. Like, you can put it on D&D terms, like make them teleport, have characters teleport towards you. It would have made the experience so much more smoother. And I think I would have enjoyed this game even more. I consider this game my game of the year, but I think if these features were there, like the character controller, the camera, and the AI navigation with a feature to teleport, I think this would have been my favorite game of all time. Like, I'm not joking. But the issues that this game have are constantly there. They are things that you have to deal with almost every second of the game. From the navigation, from the character controller, the camera not like being unyieldy, and just the frustration of not being able to see the environments are issues that happen constantly. So that being said, this is the bad side of like what I think Baldur's Gate could improve, or Larian Studios could like work on a little bit if they move forward with another Baldur's Gate or another Divinity. I think that's hopefully in the future, like we get to see another RPG from them. The short loops, the really, really short loops, that moment, that point of contact between the controller or the mouse and keyboard and the player, that immediate reaction. I just really wish they work on that, because it would make this game perfect, in my opinion. That's the bad. Now let's talk about the good. This is not fully scripted, so I'm trying to think of what is the thing that I like the most about Baldur's Gate 3. And I prepare a bunch of material, like videos, screenshots, stuff like that to show. But I think, thinking about it, I thought the narrative is great. Your decisions are important. We all talked about that. The exploration, the world is incredible. The main narrative, the characters, the progression is incredible. Like, I always really like the D&D progression, how they work, classing, multi-classes. Like, I always been a big fan of it, and I think it's a great progression system, and they really do it justice here in Baldur's Gate 3. So there is a bunch of things to love about this game. But there's something that I haven't, thinking about it, there's something that I haven't seen much talked about. Maybe by the time this video is up, is there, but I don't see a lot of people talk about the level design of this game and how the level design interacts with combat, specifically with combat, because this is a turn-based game. And turn-based games tend to not have this super strong foundation of level design. The Japanese RPG, especially, you tend to have two parties lying in front of each other, and then they just fight. And I didn't play the Divinity Original Sin games properly. I wish I had, and I'm going to, and we're probably going to talk about them in the channel. But this is, I think, my first experience in which I see a turn-based game in which the level design is so relevant, and the level design is everywhere, because you can start a fight everywhere. And I think their map design, the way they designed their specific map, their layouts, is kind of taking in consideration that combat can happen anywhere. So they tend to not be like a lot of open fields. You will not find open areas. You will find a lot of corridors with up and down and like cliffs and cover everywhere, and it might look like a very like set dressed world, like full of little paths, but I think it has to do with the idea that you can always start a fight even in your own camp, uh, and the level design is taking account of that aspect. So I think it would be interesting to see a little bit of like a couple of screenshots here about how the level design is taking in consideration for like like every encounter, and every encounter changes based on this. So we have a screenshot here. If you're just listening, I'm gonna explain it as best as possible, but from the left side you have an entrance, right? This is where you come from. You jump into a hole and you find yourself immediately in this combat encounter. The combat encounter is in a flat area, which means walls and your layout is like very important. And they do something very simple here. They put you in a room with an open door and like kind of like a funnel, like the bottleneck. So it's a very simple layout. It's a very simple technique. It's like have a bottleneck and two armies fighting. It's a very simple technique, but they use it at the beginning of the game very efficiently. So you have your side with your party here in the left side of this picture that I'm describing, and then on the opposite side you will find another army. So now they can clash, and it's really great, because the first thing they do is like they put an enemy on the door. This enemy, this one, is always there, and it just kind of your first turn is blocked. So you have to understand this is like a bottleneck immediately. Everybody has different tactics. What did I do here is let's clear this. If you're listening, I'm just erasing all, like I'm drawing on top of a picture if you're listening. So might be interesting to watch this video later if you're interested. But then they do something really amazing, that so by having a bottleneck, you know where to put your tank, your fighter, your like the guy that can take the damage. You know where to put it immediately. Put it in a bottleneck. Keep your party out. And the game teaches you this by teaching you another thing. This is the beginning of the game, by teaching you another thing that is hazard. So we have exploding barrels here. So a person that is like observant, you can finish this fight in many ways, but a person that is observant can go like, oh, okay, I can place my fighter, my tank, if I have it, in like one character, any character, in the bottleneck, and I can bring a spellcaster here and attack the barrel over here, right? Through the neck, which would have like all these enemies like lined up, ready for an explosion. So in a simple way, in one of the first encounters you find in the game, possibly, you are learning layouts matter. Put your fighters in front. Be careful of hazards, and use your environment to your advantage. Which means that taking this in consideration, every combat encounter is going to be different just by the layout alone. And it makes me quite jealous, because it was such a cooperative endeavor by the combat design team and the level design team and the encounter design. Because it's not just the combat designer is designing these tools, and then the level designer is like blowing, like the brains are blowing up, and he's like, what can I do with these tools? Making most of the encounters really unique, making you adapt every time, and making you kind of like, when you lose, making it really rewarding to lose. Because when you have a layout, when the level design is so important for a combat encounter like this, you start planning tactics for your next fight even before you lose, or even before you decide to load a previous save file, because the fight is just impossible to win. So you're like, how can I do this? Instead of like giving up, going in and just like hacking away, or just going somewhere else and try to grind levels. No, it becomes more a thought process. It's like, hey, I have this skill. Let's talk about the skill of D&D called Wall of Fire, for example. It's like, hey, I have Wall of Fire. How can I use this to push the enemy back? You start thinking in like a very high level of tactics here. So let's see another example of an encounter. Again, it's at the beginning, no spoilers. So let's see. I have another one here that I wanted to see, because this previous example that I used. It talks about it's just on flat terrain. So what happens first when we know a combat encounter is coming? So we talked about this, and we talked about this, right? We talked that when you have to repeat an encounter, because the layouts and the level design is so important, your tactics start developing like really strongly. So this is an example, right? In the screen, we have a combat encounter in front of us. We have it in this corner. We're gonna have in the top corner, we're gonna have an encounter in the future, which is here. So we're gonna have an encounter there. Now, the level design, I consider this brilliant, already shows us like a direct path, a path to high terrain, and a path to the back. So I know there's a combat encounter in front of me. So just because the level design is taking into account so much in the combat, now I have to think, even before the fight starts, what would be better for me to start this fight in the best footing possible? Okay, that being the case, so let's see another screenshot really quick. So I have another screenshot here of the fight afterwards. So here it is. So before we were behind, we approached the combat encounter, and this was like the main path was on the left here. I really recommend watching the video in this case. I think sometimes the visuals are necessary to explain certain things, so I really recommend watching the video. But so in this combat encounter, the game gives us a normal, like a regular path, usually what you would be taking to explore, and then it gives you a high ground here and another path on the other side, and then the enemies are here. So it sounds super simple. But the game is slowly starting to teach you how to think tactically, using the environments to your advantage. So what is happening here? In my case, I decided to, let's erase this so we can see. So in my case, I decided to grab my stronger fighters here and push them forward to have land the melee attacks, while I have my long range characters take care of the enemies that were on higher ground already and be able to support back. You know, which is already looking like, if you see like the screen, if you see the screen, it's already looking like an American football planning of the strategy, which I consider American football one of the most strategically like and interesting sports to play and to watch. So this is already kind of doing something similar, in which you're like planning your strategies using layouts and using like level design. I don't see this happen a lot in turn-based games. There's games like XCOM that they tend to not have this level of richness, in my opinion, on level design and encounter design, because in the case of Baldur's Gate, the combat level design is working in tandem with exploration to create an even higher level of tactics. I don't see a lot of people talking about this. But I really wish in the future that we get more RPGs like this. An example would be that I think this would be a great opportunity for like JRPGs to look at Baldur's Gate and be like, hey, first, turn-based games are successful. Baldur's Gate reception was incredible from gamers and from critics alike. And I think that's an example to follow in the game industry. So I'm gonna say it. I am gonna say it. A lot of people, I'm pretty sure, thought about this, but I think Final Fantasy or games like this should follow this type of structure. I think is the perfect melding of respecting the background of a franchise like that and pushing the franchise forward into a direction that is modern but respects like its history. So with that, like, I don't think every RPG needs to turn into an action RPG, to be honest. But in this case, I think it's a great example, and I really wish other franchises take this framework and try to explore it. You can have a linear story, but just having the marriage of turn-based and level design working together to create very unique combat encounters, to me, is fascinating. It's fascinating. I think this video has gone a little bit longer than I expected, but these are the things I wanted to talk about Baldur's Gate. Finally, I would like to say thank you to Larian Studios for creating a game of this scope without anything that can hamper its like quality. There is no the monetization is very clear and straightforward. The game is just, again, very clear and straightforward. It's the product that you buy, and it's great. So I hope the industry takes this as an example that these games can be successful because people want them. A lot of developers, and I think this was a controversy that I would like to touch really quick. A lot of developers came out saying that the gamers should not expect these type of games to be commonplace. And I think it came in a place of fear because this game's scope is enormous. It's bigger than it's so big, and it was a little bit scary to see the reception, the success. As a developer, I also felt that a little bit uneasiness of seeing like a game this big being this successful is something that Grand Theft Auto tends to do as well in a lot of developers. But I think in this case, it came from a franchise that was not expected. This success came from a franchise that nobody thought was going to do this well, because everybody sees Grand Theft Auto and they know there's going to be success, and there's so much budget behind those games. But this game, yeah, there's a high budget, but it's not Grand Theft Auto budget. Let's get this clear. And it's getting this huge success and the scope and everything, and especially with the early access, how they handle early access, it felt like the development was long, arduous, huge, a lot of feedback. It was difficult. So a lot of developers became scared that this would become a norm. My case included. But as I thought about it, I stopped being scared and I started to get excited. What if this is a norm? How exciting is that? I think that would be a more creative and interesting game industry in general. If if the passion, the respect to the gamer, and the player first mentality of Larian Studios, especially with Baldur's Gate 3, if we grab that and expand it to the whole industry, I just think it would be a more exciting industry. And I think it would be a more, um, how can I put it? I think it would be more fair for everyone, more fair for the developer, more fair for the consumer, more sustainable as well. And I think the philosophy of Baldur's Gate 3 can be applied to other games as well, like to every scope. So, to every developer, if you're watching this is exciting, not scary, in my opinion. I'm so excited for the future. I'm so excited for whatever Larian Studio is gonna do. And congratulations, Larian Studio, for making this masterpiece. Thank you, Baldur's Gate 3, for existing. The stars align in such a way that nobody expected. I really love this game. This is the Game Design Perspective. I'm Santi. Remember to comment, subscribe, share. It helps us a lot. We're just starting. And see you guys next week. Have a good one.